Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude, but we're not here to talk about Latitude today. We're here to talk about the Pathfinders methodology, career maps, and a personal board of advisors. The first piece on the career map is figuring out where you've been, where you're at, and where you want to go, the past, present, and future. And we break the career map down into 5 different dimensions. We'll talk about that with our guests today. We look at the jobs and roles that you held, the skills, achievements, and accomplishments, education and certifications along the way, and some of the fun stuff. And of course, once you have a plan like that, whether you're early career, mid-career, late career, who are you going to share it with? Who's going to help guide some of that planning along the way on your journey? That's your personal board of advisors, your multiple mentors helping you along the way. We'll talk about some of those board members as well. The favorite quote for our guests today is never limit yourself because of others' limited imagination. Never limit others because of your own limited imagination. Big on building people up. Stephen Shackelford is our guest today. Over 40 years of experience working with business owners and CPAs focused on enhancing their retirement plan experience through providing education, guidance, and counseling. Throughout these couple of decades, he's held senior sales executive leadership positions. He's been national business development roles. He's done a fair amount of consulting as well. He's been in a bunch of different leadership positions, and he's also been vice president, qualified plans. His objective right now is to help his clients navigate this seemingly complex world of retirement plans, making them simple to understand and really just help people. You're going to feel a lot of that, this theme of helping people throughout the show today. He leverages his expertise of retirement plans to design these and helps with a lot of industry partnerships. We're talking about a couple of them prior to hopping on the show here today. Whenever you have a conversation with him, you're going to dive into some of the tax saving strategies at the organizational level, reduce fiduciary responsibility, but ultimately he's helping create financial wellness education programs through all the things that he does. So one of the pieces that I wanted to share beforehand is not only is he doing this for financial support, but also outside of being a lover of automobiles, since he was single-digit years old, he's big on investing, coaching, developing football players at the youth. So hailing from the Midwest, Stephen, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pete, thank you so much for having me. This is truly an honor and a privilege, and just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Of course, I'm glad to do it, and we got to thank our buddy Dave for bringing us together. So always a pleasure, and we'll have to make sure that we tag him a little bit more in the comments as a super connector that he is. Stephen, the first thing that we always ask is, what'd you want to be whenever you were growing up?
It's funny you asked that question, Pete. When I was younger, I thought I was going to end up somewhere in the automobile profession, either as a designer or on the sales side associated with automobiles. It's always been a passion of mine. My grandfather, when I was growing up, he was the chief foreman at International Harvester in Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah. And every 2 years, and I recall this like it was yesterday, every 2 years he would come home with a new vehicle. But before coming home, he would say, "Hey, Stevie, let's take a ride." And I would actually get to go with him to pick out his new car.
Whoa.
Kind of how I formed a passion around the automobile industry. And it's been a passion of mine since I was, 8 years old.
Okay, so 2 questions there. What was your first car, and what was your favorite car along the way as your grandfather was going through? Because what is that? 8 years to now, that's at least 10 different cars, we'll call it, that you were able to see. So first one and favorite one.
My first car was a Fiat X19.
Okay.
2-door sports car with a removable roof. I bought it when I was 14 years old with my paper route money. Wasn't even old enough to drive in Southern California.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That was the first one. What was the favorite one?
The favorite was the International Harvester Travel Law. And the reason why that was my favorite, that was the second vehicle that my grandfather had purchased. And it was, for lack of a better term, the very first type suburban vehicle. So as a kid, we would hop from the third row to the second row to the front seat. And back then, there were really those, or a lack of seat belts and no child seats. So,
Yeah.
and I have four brothers and sisters. So we were able to, just hop around in the vehicle. It was just so much fun. And I vividly remember that as part of my childhood. So I would say that growing up, that was my favorite.
That was the favorite. So as I was going through the bio and getting things started here today, your couple of decades of professional experience, oddly enough, did not mention the automobile industry. So at some point along the way, did you have a change of heart? Did you have another conversation with somebody? Something changed, and you said, maybe I'm going to keep cars as a hobby, but I'm going to take my professional talents in another direction.
Yeah, precisely. My father was an industrial engineer for Security Pacific Bank. And
Mhm.
for those of you that may not be aware of what an IE is, it's an efficiency expert. So what he would do is analyze businesses, identify opportunities to enhance the businesses by way of efficiencies, and transition from there to save and reduce costs on behalf of businesses. And I felt that to be extremely beneficial. And not only that, it was very powerful looking at it from an operational standpoint.
Yeah.
So as I started to grow, I started to become more and more in tune with how he could help other businesses grow by way of identifying efficiencies. So my path kind of migrated into that because I was a real big tinkerer. I used to take things apart when I was little. I'd get brand new Christmas gifts, take them apart, see how they work, and then put them back together again. So I really gravitated towards that from a professional standpoint. And so when I attended Cal State Fullerton, that was something that I was focused on. But, I had an opportunity to really get to understand what dad was actually doing. And I found that, Pete, it didn't fit my personality. So what I mean by that is from an operational standpoint, it made a lot of sense.
Mhm.
From a relationship standpoint,
Yep.
there was a true disconnect because there are times where IEs will go in, identify opportunities to enhance a business, and they may implement different types of features that do not require a individual.
Yep.
So people may end up losing their jobs as a result of my father's recommendations. Well,
We call them imaginary engineers.
yes,
Yeah. And I didn't know about that degree whenever I was in college. I studied mechanical, but it was one of those things that's so interesting what's possible. And just like any roles, jobs, professions out there, there's different, levels on the spectrum, right? So, are you able to improve processes and increase efficiency, like you alluded to for your father? Yes, yes, most definitely.
right.
And that's the piece of going from current state to ideal state. And there's a future state in the middle. And I think one of the things that you transition to is, okay, let's help everybody outline this from their lifestyle, right? And let's look at that future state. Let's bring that into reality as we keep working towards that ideal state. I'll hand it back over to you, but talk as we keep going through some of this transition and figuring out, how do we bring that efficiency in another dimension of the life?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that question because as I thought through where my skill set
Mhm.
could benefit society, something really hit home with me. And that is the fact that my grandfather had worked so hard. He and I were extremely close. He had worked
Yeah.
so hard and ended up getting a pretty darn good pension when he ended up retiring from International Harvester. But he was only able to really benefit from that pension for about 3 years before passing away.
Yeah.
And that was life changing for me. And that was at the time where I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do. I knew IE was not the route I was going to take.
Yep.
So that's the reason why I kind of migrated into more of a financial professional role of some sort. Really looking at how I can help people scale, grow, and ultimately benefit from all the hard years they put into their jobs so they can retire earlier and enjoy their lifestyle. So that was really powerful. And I think that the passing of my grandfather really put me in a position where I was, okay, how can I help people become more proficient over the years? So when I ended up transitioning on from Cal State, I ended up taking a position with Security Pacific Bank,
Uh-huh.
and the buyout took place with Security Pacific, which prompted my father to start his own industrial engineering firm in Southern California. So from security, I ended up actually getting recruited by the Capital Group American Funds. So I was there for a few years. And when the Capital Group recruited me, I was there for 27 years, my career. So, and when you look at, when I look back on, the contributions I was able to make, that was a very pivotal time in my life because, looking at it from cultural standpoint, every decision that was made at the Capital Group was made with one objective in mind. How are the decisions we make as an organization going to impact the lives of our shareholders?
Yep.
And that resonated with me. I mean, really resonated with me to the core, because now you have a professional organization that's extremely successful, now transitioning to helping people scale, grow, and eventually live the life that they want.
So along the way, you had a couple of people that were guiding you, providing insight, right? You talked about your grandfather, you talked about your father. There was some overlap of, some of the where you guys worked, right? Clock in, clock out each day. But then you transitioned, right? Nobody that you mentioned so far was at the Capital Group. So talk through a little bit of how you navigated making that decision, which you ended up staying there for quite a while, right? Almost 10x the average of current people under the age of 35 now. Isn't that crazy? You were there for 20
Well,
years. If you're under the age of 35 today, right, 2025, you're going to stay at a company, right, about 2.7, 2.8 years. So you're there for 10x, just to put it in perspective, right? And maybe you had 10 different roles along the way. So that's something for us to think about. But, Stephen, tell me a little bit more about who was helping you navigate. Is the Capital Group the right place for you? Is it time to leave at that, liquidity acquisition event? What was that like? Or maybe you just said, hey, they tapped me on the shoulder. I'm in, I'm going.
no, it was very strategic.
Mhm.
How I thought about my career path once I transitioned to Capital, given the synergies within the culture and my own personal fit
Yeah.
from a standpoint of helping people. I would say there were two critical, when I say critical, I mean to my core, two critical mentors that helped me scale, grow within that organization. And the first of which, Karen Casillas. Karen was my manager on the operations side. And she was one of the most dynamic, um, sharpest individuals I had ever worked with at that time. And this was very early on in my career where I was trying to make the transition from operations to sales. Karen kind of took me under her wing, really helped me to understand operationally how things fit within the business space and identify an actual growth path within the organization, to which I just ran with it. She spent a lot of time coaching and developing me, because I really didn't know too much. Even though I had a minor in finance, I really didn't know how all of the intricacies worked within an organization. It was more or less, a lot of the concepts that were taught were conceptual, how to help an individual from a financial advisory standpoint, but that meant nothing on the mutual fund side, especially on the operational side. So she kind of took me under her wing and gave me a really good understanding as to the entire business, how it worked, from how the trading worked to how a mutual fund takes advantage of creating an opportunity for investors to be more conservative in their investment approach versus looking at simply a stock and looking at the multiple organizations that are involved in the mutual fund, to make that more of a safe investment on behalf of various investors.
So there were some hard skills and some soft skills along the way. We're going to get to the second pivotal mentor that you alluded to, but before we get there, two quick questions. One, where'd you find Karen?
Karen actually was hired as a supervisor at the Capital Group.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually pulled me onto her team from another team, because we had interacted quite a bit. And she said, well, I want you to be part of my team, because she saw something in me that could be developed further.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we met.
And then whenever you talk about the aspect of her helping plan out some of your career path, did you initiate that and said, hey, boss, hey, Karen, how might I grow and flourish in this organization? Because, what we find is a lot of younger people don't really know what to ask.
Right.
And sometimes those magical mentors are going to say, hey, Stephen, I think you were probably going to ask me this question. I'm just going to toss it out there in case you forgot to ask me in one of these, sessions. But seems like it was really helpful. You're talking about it years later. How'd that planning of the career piece go? Was that her side or your side?
It was actually through what we call monthly coaching sessions. She would ask me a series of questions to get at what was important to me by way of career path, because I knew early on that I was going to be a part of the Capital Group for a number of years. I didn't know I was going to be there for 27 years, but I knew that that was the right place for me. I'm a very spiritual young man, and I knew that God was putting me in a position to take advantage of some opportunities long-term through the Capital Group. So through those sessions, she would ask a series of questions. And then as she got to know me and got to understand kind of what made me tick, so to speak, we ended up coming up with a career path. And that career path was more predicated on the operational side. But with my personality, I knew ultimately my goal was to move over to the sales side of the organization. And that's where my second mentor came into play.
Okay, bring it on.
A gentleman by the name of Steve Malvassa, he was also involved in coaching youth in baseball and football. So he was the senior, what I would consider to be the executive retirement plan sales leader for the Capital Group at the time. And he actually had an opportunity to observe me in a couple of different meetings, focused on banking institutions. Legal counsel was there. And he said, well, I think we need to think about a different career path from operations to more sales. So at the time, I was one of the first to transition from a ops role into a sales role at the Capital Group as a result of Steve's mentorship. And I ended up getting licensed, my 6326 professional licenses. And on his team, I started off as being a retirement resource for the external sales force. And
Okay.
then as time moved on, roughly about a year and a half later, I ended up being what we call a mutual fund wholesaler. So having my own sales territory
Yeah.
out on the West Coast, which was absolutely phenomenal. It was the perfect fit for me because now I get to engage, speak with financial advisors. I knew the operations side cold, thanks to Karen's help.
Right.
Now I could transition that to how we could help financial advisors help their clients utilizing the American Funds products and solutions.
So rewind a little bit to that transition point. Okay. You're going from ops to sales, and Steve says, "Hey, I think you ought to do this." Did you at a certain point feel on the inside, man, I must stink if he's telling me to switch? Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Did that thought ever go through your mind, or because you had done that planning with Karen, you knew that this is what good looks like to make this step in the right direction? Having done that work early, right? Done that planning, put that bit of a map together, because it could be a little scary and a little frightening if somebody just yanks you out of a meeting where you think you're doing a good job briefing folks, and he says, you're done over there swapping sides, other part of the org chart tomorrow. Is that how'd that go, Steve?
Actually, it was extremely smooth because
Yep.
when I got to a point where I was really engaging
Yep.
with a number of external resources on the operations side, so I was starting to work with financial advisors. I actually wore a hat that required me to travel 90% of the time on behalf of the capital, where I was actually going out and meeting with various trust companies, banking institutions, third party administrators, record keepers, really any sort of entity that had a contractual relationship with the capital group. My job was to go out, understand that entity, bring that information back to the ops team to ensure that these parties were operating above board. Because at the time, there was something called late day trading taking place in our industry. And there were so many relationships that the Capital Group was monitoring that they really needed a couple resources to travel. Well, I was picked as one of those two resources from an operational and compliance standpoint. So that gave me an opportunity to really flex my skills by way of not only engaging with other partners. So I really felt like I was wearing two different hats. The first hat was a compliance hat.
Mhm.
The second hat was a relationship hat.
Yep.
So I thought that it was a very smooth transition because ultimately I had communicated to Karen early on in our conversations, my long-term goal was to focus on the sales side.
Yep.
So it just took some time to get there because I needed the right advocate on the sales side to say, yeah, this young man has the skill set that we want in the field and can deliver on the objectives of the sales team.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talk about here is in Pathfinders are some of those different board seats, right? The personal board of advisors. So it seems like you had the supervisor board seat filled with Karen, and then probably somebody else came along as another supervisor. Then Karen was one of those initial functional mentors, right? Been there, done that in your world, in your role. But then Steve got into a little bit of that cross-functional mentorship and was almost like an advocate, right? We call this the super
Exactly.
connector, the sponsor role. And so that's the piece where it's a couple of different people providing that insight and guidance along the way. So just as the listeners are thinking about this, right, how those individuals might have transitioned from, one kind of a guide or an advisor, no pun intended, to another one on your board. So as your supervisor changes, okay, maybe Karen goes to another seat, right? As Steve goes, maybe he transitioned from cross-functional mentor to an advocate to a champion, right? So there's different ways to figure. And then at some point, you probably said, hey, I don't need you guys in my inner circle right now. And what we call that piece is retiring somebody from your board, right? It's not that, hey, I don't want to ever talk to you again. We kind of put them, we call it the bench or the outer circle, right? I got the core team, right? We call it starting five. You're a basketball guy, starting 11 men on the field, right? If you're a football fan. But it's just that piece of, who are those folks that you're working with more consistently? So, Stephen, let's jump towards the end, right? End of Capital Group, right? Not there, right now. So, talk about some of the things that were going through your head as you're getting ready to make the transition to invest.
Yeah, it was quite challenging to make the decision to leave the capital.
Mm-hmm.
The education and training that I got there was just absolutely exceptional. It was actually a gut-wrenching decision because it was my decision to leave.
Yeah.
And, the reason why I left, I ended up partnering with another firm that was a partner of the Capital Group through my endeavors of out there meeting with clients on the business development side. And the long and short of it is they were looking to make a change and build out their own distribution channel nationally because they did not have one. They relied on the Capital Group for a majority of their sales. So I actually put together what I would describe as a blueprint for things I would think about if I were looking to build out a distribution team.
Yep.
And this was simply from a relationship standpoint. I had no intentions of ever leaving Capital Group. But what occurred was he ended up, a gentleman by the name at PAI, he ended up looking at the overall blueprint and said, you know what, why don't you just come over and run it for me? And I said, what? Okay, well, a lot of thought would have to go into that. I ended up, making the move and running his sales team nationally for, a couple of years.
Yeah.
Focused on the micro, small space. And, it ended up being a really, really good move. So because what I knew, Pete, was capital.
Right.
And what Michael Kiley introduced me to was life outside of the Capital Group and what that could look like. Even though there was a lot of consternation with respect to making that move, and a lot of soul purging, I felt like it was one of the best decisions that I had made at the time because it gave me some insights to the broader markets and how I could impact the lives of others by managing and running the distribution team. And it was a tremendous success. Ended up, building it from scratch and building internal support versus external sales support. It was an absolutely phenomenal move. And I felt like it was time. It was time for me to take on that additional challenge.
Yeah. Now today, where are you spending most of your time? We'll get to, some of the car hobbies and some of the coaching and developing of the youth football. That's very important. But talk to us, and a little sales plug here is perfectly fine. But what's today looking like for you?
So today, I manage the 401k sales division on behalf of Invest. And what that entails is meeting with actual business owners, C-suite individuals throughout the entire U.S., identifying opportunities to enhance or implement a 401k plan on behalf of their teams to help them even reduce their own tax strategies. Oftentimes, when you're talking with a CEO or a key decision maker when it comes to retirement plans, they view the retirement plan as simply a commodity, something they have to have in order to attract and retain employees. Well, I take it a step further, given my background and experience, and I help them to see it in a different light. I would help them to see the retirement plan as a business development tool.
Yeah.
That can not only be viewed as a retention strategy or utilized as a retention strategy, but also help reduce taxes on behalf of the senior members of the organization as to how the plan is actually structured. And a lot of business owners, they just don't know that those opportunities are available. In addition to that, it becomes a significant retention strategy to retain key executive employees.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different plan design than what I would call an employee-based design. So I really take them through three different iterations. First iteration is employee design. Second iteration is a diverse design, meaning that you're compensating employees through the plan at a little higher level so that key executives can max out their contributions within the plan. And then the third iteration is an executive-based design.
Yeah.
And that's where you're truly focused on the key executives within the organization. Even though you're giving a little something back to the employees, you're still rewarding the executives at a much higher level within the plan while still meeting the Department of Labor regulations by way of plan design. So it becomes a strategy, a business strategy to have the retirement plan and not just viewed as a commodity.
I think we could spend a lot more time on that topic here, right? We're here to talk about the Career Map Personal Board of Advisors. If you want to go into how you can do some creative business development and senior leadership retention, please reach back out to Stephen. Next question here, as we get ready to close up, is we talked about what worked for you, right? We talked about some of the mentorship. You had a couple of different mentors. You put a little bit of a career map together. That's what we do over at Latitude, right? It's a software that's guiding you through those pieces, right? Hey, who are those mentors? Helping you find them a little bit sooner. Hey, let's build up this career map so you have something digitally so you can share it with others. If you just share a little bit of, the value to an organization, right? How's this kind of stuff help companies, right? Putting your executive hat on and just talking about that methodology of, arming each one of our people with a personal board and, talking about not just talking about mentorship, but living it, right? Hey, mentorship is a priority here. And then coupling that with having a plan. It was extremely valuable for you, but just talk kind of a more macro level about it.
Yeah, I think that is one of the key elements that any business leader needs to consider. They need to consider their network. Who are they relying on to help them make decisions to become more proficient, whether that be an external mentor or an internal mentor? Mm-hmm. So oftentimes when I'm having conversations with business owners, I'm getting at that. How is the business structured? Who is making the decisions on behalf of the business? Are the right key components in place? And being able to share some insights about even creating some form of a coaching and development and mentorship program if it's not in place today. And when you think about those key individuals that can impact the lives of someone else and make them more proficient, not only at their duties, but also repay the favor and take on that mentorship role themselves.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about building a significantly powerful team of folks. And, I don't necessarily focus on the bottom line of the business. That's the business owner's responsibility. But if you have the right pieces in place, the right mentorship programs in place, how you're viewing the business and what the key objectives are of the business going forward, and those key decision makers are involved in bringing up some of those individuals, now you're talking about a cohesive unit that's going to have more buy-in into the organization. And if they have more buy-in into the organization, they're going to work harder for the organization and smart because they feel like they have skin in the game. And at the end of the day, Pete, it's not about how much money you make as a business. I mean, I know that that's extremely important, but it's about taking a look at your bench and identifying whether or not you have the right bench and the right skill set to train and motivate that bench to put them in a different position of success within the organization, whatever success means to that owner or business leader. And when I'm talking with business owners, that's what I'm having conversations about. I'm not having discussions about the 401k until I understand the why behind the business.
Yep. That's the first piece. I took a couple of notes over here, Stephen. I'm going to get ready to read through these. One closing advice or tidbit that you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, the way that I see it is absolutely essential that you look at helping others within the workplace. Um, I have never built my career on looking at it from my perspective as to how I can get more out of something. I've always looked at it as how can I help the individuals within the company, and how can I add value that will help them grow? As a result of that, I've grown, not only as a leader, but as someone that's focused on bringing in sales for the organization as well. And that's just, to be honest, Pete, that's just a different mindset. It's a mindset of my own personal growth as well as the growth of others first. And everything else kind of takes care of itself. And I learned that from my father. Be a steward of the community, and the community will help you grow. And whether that growth is financial or whether that growth is spiritual, you're still growing as an individual.
I love it. I think you talked a lot about those efficiencies and growth, and that's a common theme throughout all of this. So, Stephen, thanks for joining us today. The financial freedom fanatic, right? Initially, talking to us about the efficiencies at the workplace and how that can translate to efficiencies on our financial plan, growing as individuals, professionally, but also financially. It all came together. Coming to us from Indianapolis, a Pacers fan and Colts fan, and from an introduction from our good friend Dave Pygon, super connector. Stephen was inspired by his grandfather at International Harvester. Young Stevie formed his passion for cars and automobiles from Fiat to his favorites that he shared. His father was an efficiency engineer, industrial engineer, as you heard us talk about, from a bank, right? Stephen then went to Cal State Fullerton, initially from Irvine, California, but he found out that IE was not for him. He imagined greater things and other pastures. The passing of the patriarch and his family recalibrated your aspirations to help people become more proficient financially. From the security group to capital group for 27 years. Karen's critical mentorship early on helped you with the transitioning from operations to sales. Because you had that career map laid out, it made sense. It was something that was there, and others knew not only that you were good at your job, but where you wanted to go, the hard skills and the soft skills. The great mentor asked him a series of questions on a monthly cadence with regard to what you wanted to do. And then Steve in sales was a super mentor number two of many. He was the best of the best. So the reminder to make sure that we're picking those mentors, guides, and advisors to be great at their craft. He also saw you excelling in your role. You were crushing it and said, I want this guy to go even further, even longer. Hone skills on compliance, and now you began flourishing on the relationship front. We fast forwarded to transitioning out of the capital group, a big piece, but Michael helped open your eyes to gain insights to the broader market. And today, leading the 401k division of Invest, helping companies and execs reduce the tax impact. From an employee benefit tool to a business development opportunity. Really cool insight that I didn't think of until today. And then looking at it from a senior executive leadership retention strategy. You shared that mentorship is the X factor for business success, empowering and motivating our successful organizations. Thanks, Stephen, for reminding us about our why behind the business.
It is my sincere pleasure. And once again, a couple of, shout outs to some folks that have been very instrumental with regards to books that I've read. Dave Pygon, Win the 16, when he and I ended up connecting, holy cow. I mean, what a stud this guy is. He's an absolute stud. And I absolutely love spending time with him. But his book was extremely pivotal in how I looked at my day, winning the 16 hours of the day. How do you get up? How do you approach the day? How is the day managed? His insights around that are exceptional. So those of you out there that you haven't read, Win the 16, I think it could literally change your life. The second book I would certainly like to mention is Accelerate by a gentleman by the name of Scott Jarrett. Scott Jarrett ended up writing Accelerate because it starts with the why. It's about how individuals can reach financial freedom faster. And that really pulls at my heartstrings based on, my own personal interactions with my grandfather and not being able to enjoy his retirement. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read Accelerate, I would certainly, pull it up on Amazon, and it's a really, really good read. And it starts with the client's why, not talking about products and solutions without understanding the goals and objectives of the individual.
Love it. Thanks everybody for listening. Till next time.